effect, but I would again encourage my honourable colleague, instead of taking all the inbound invective and all the rage farming from the leader's office, that he trudge back down that long hallway to his leader's office and say, Mr. Leader, you know what we can do today? We can bring down dental care costs for Canadians by passing the bill of the fall economic statement that will help seniors, that will help poor families, that will help children in this country. We can have an impact today on Canadians' lives. Stand up and vote for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Let's go back to ArriveCan. The government set up an $80,000 application to simplify traveller declarations. Nothing to alarm the Prime Minister or the Cabinet. It was just a small, unimportant expense that's glossed over when summarising the department's actions. And then it went from 80,000 to 10 million to 30 million to 59 million. It seems to me that when I believe it should have been mentioned to the Prime Minister. When exactly were the Prime Minister and the Cabinet notified of these unacceptable cost overruns? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague asked a very good question. She no doubt remembers that there was a pandemic over the past few years, the worst pandemic since 1919, with the worst economic crash since 1930. She knows that public servants had two directives, the first of which was to act rapidly and efficiently to save hundreds of thousands of lives and millions of jobs, and the second was to act in a good way by following rules, which was unfortunately not done. The Auditor General noted this. Luckily, her recommendations have, for the most part, already been implemented. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. The Liberals seem to want to pass the buck to civil servants, but it is unthinkable that a cost overrun of this magnitude was not reported. It is unthinkable that no one warned the government that it might be in trouble. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet were certainly alerted, and yet they continued to spend Quebecers' money as if it was Black Friday. Did any reasonable person in this government say to themselves, well, that's enough, or did they hope that no one would notice? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I already answered that question earlier. What I'd like to add, however, is the importance and the value of the Auditor General's work. I'd like to thank her, but also encourage her to do her work. It is an essential role for our democracy in a context where Parliament and parliamentarians need that work to force governments to do the right thing and to make sure that rules are followed by all public servants federally.
The Honourable Member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
After 8 years, Canadians know that this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost or the corruption.
Right.
With NDP help, these Liberals gave at least $20 million to a two-person company during the ArriveCan scandal for no work done, and Canadians want their money back. Meanwhile, the Auditor General found a stark absence of documentation. Reports now show that tens of thousands of emails were illegally deleted. Will the Prime Minister and his NDP partners responsible for this scandal stand up and tell us when they will release the documents that are missing?
Now, when? I'm going to encourage all members to please not take the floor when they are not recognized by the chair, so that the chair and all members can hear the questions and the answers. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives want to pretend that this is an issue that the government doesn't take seriously, we do. Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned about these documents, and that is precisely why we support the Information Commissioner's decision to review this matter. And Mr. Speaker, CBSA has already indicated that they will work with the Information Commissioner on providing any information they have. As I've said before, we want to get to the bottom of this, and any wrongdoing will come with consequences.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, a very simple question. When will the government release the Winnipeg lab documents to this House?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you very much.
much, Mr. Speaker. The short answer is imminently. It's going to happen right away. But I want to thank all parties because it is through cooperation and working together, the mechanism that we set forth. Remember, it is the Public Health Agency of Canada that makes decisions around redactions. We set forward a collaborative process that all parties participated in, and as a result of that, this is exactly why additional information will be deposed before this House, and that additional information was exactly the intention in setting up that committee, and that means that Canadians will have additional views on the information therein.
The honourable member from Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the 4 MPs on the Winnipeg Lab Committee found that most of the information the government withheld from Parliament was withheld to shield the Prime Minister and ministers from embarrassment rather than to protect national security. These 4 MPs, including a Liberal member, recommended that the majority of the information withheld by this government be made public. Will the government finally admit that its decision to withhold documents from Parliament wasn't to protect national security, but rather to protect itself from political embarrassment?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the honourable member across knows very well it is the Public Health Agency of Canada, not the Government of Canada, that makes a decision with respect to redactions. And those decisions have to do with national security and also with the protection of employees. And what we said, and by the way, it was initiated by this government, is we said there were questions that parliamentarians had, wishing to see additional information. We then, working, and I would remind the Conservatives didn't want to participate in this process. They actually were against participating in the process that produced the documents. It was the NDP, then the Bloc, and then the Conservatives all participated, and that's exactly why this information is available.
You want to split that hair?
Ask order. Order. Colleagues, it is important for this conference. If I could ask the member from Ajax and the member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, to please take their conversation outside of this chamber, or to ask questions and to receive responses. Colleagues, the honourable member from l'honorable député de Laval-des-Îles.
The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, we entered into a historic agreement with Moderna to create life-saving vaccines in Laval. Can the Minister tell us about the progress of this facility and what it means for jobs, for growth, and for success in Canada's biomanufacturing sector? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague for Laval-des-Îles and all my colleagues. We've delivered. Last Friday, I was with my colleagues to celebrate the end of the construction of the Moderna factory, the most modern factory in the world. It'll be here in Canada. We'll be able to build produce 100 million vaccines. Mr. Speaker, this is great news for Laval, and excellent news for Montreal, excellent news for research, and excellent news to make sure that we continue to be at the forefront of scientific progress in the world. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, in the Chaudière-Appalaches region, an upsurge in violent crime is creating a great deal of insecurity. These violent crimes only confirm the appalling increase in violence in the country, which under this government has seen a 39% increase in violent crimes and a 61% increase in assaults with weapons or bodily harm. That's a sad record after 8 years of this Prime Minister. When will he reverse his laxist policies on crime and send criminals to prison where they belong? The Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister for Justice, I appreciate my colleague's question. What I would like to highlight for all Canadians is that crime in our community is a priority for every single parliamentarian in this House. That being said, with Bill C-48, which has just been adopted 2 months ago, With that bill, we have been able to target violent offenders that have used a firearm or weapon in their crime. And we will target them in particular so they remain in prison. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government's policies allow violent criminals to serve their sentences in the comfort of their own living rooms, courtesy of the Bloc-supported Bill C5. Another story of this constant blunder has been made public. A teenage girl was lured by an ex-policeman who is serving his sentence at home. This is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, at a time when violence of a sexual nature has jumped by 71% since this government took office. What does the Prime Minister have to say to the victim who had the courage to speak out and who is seeing this sweet sentence served by her attacker at home? The Honourable Minister for Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Violent and sexual crimes are an absolute priority for our government, and that has been the case since we came to power. With regards to intimate partner violence, we targeted those actions a number of times through our bills, through bails as well, and through other sentencings. With regards to mandatory minimum sentences, we have a complete contrast with the Conservatives. When we deal with the overrepresentation of Indigenous and Black communities in our prisons, we have to target that kind of measure.
Member, South Surrey, White Rock.
Common sense Conservatives will stop the crime that the NDP Liberal Prime Minister has unleashed on our streets for 8 years. Instead of enforcing the law and stopping crime, he's going after law-abiding sports shooters and hunters. Machine guns are illegal in Canada since the 70s, but last week, caught on video, violent attackers with machine guns opened fire at a home in small city White Rock. Why does the Prime Minister prioritize billions of dollars going after hunters and lawful gun owners instead of the real criminals?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been steadfast and focused when it comes to going after serious criminals, something that the Conservatives can't actually talk about. As they yell out, Mr. Speaker, it'd be interesting for Canadians to know that during their time in office, they cut 600 RCMP employees from being able to operate across this country. Mr. Speaker, the so-called common sense Conservative means cuts to policing. We are cleaning up the mess they created.
The Honourable Member from Balpec.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Investments in infrastructure like roads, highways, bridges are crucial for our supply chains, local economies, and traditional industries, commuters, and all Canadians. Last week, our government, along with the province of Prince Edward Island, invested over $21 million to improve local roads, benefiting islanders and building on significant infrastructure investments. Can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities share with this House the government's policy on projects like this and how they benefit rural communities?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for an excellent question, for his advocacy to get roads built in his community. This announcement worth more than $21 million is going to help build or improve 149 kilometres of road on the island. We continue to fund different road supports across programs, whether it's the Canada Community Building Fund, the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, National Trade Corridors Fund, or the Investing Canada Infrastructure Plan, which included specific eligibility for rural roads. We've got programs in Calgary and my own constituency in Nova Scotia and on the island. We're going to keep doing what it takes to put people to work in good paying jobs that build communities.
Hey. The Honourable Member from Churchill-Kiewatnik-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians across the country are struggling